Hey there, Steve Gamache with another Chef Knives to Go quick look product review. And what we're looking at this time is a line brought in under the Yahiko brand, Chef Knives to Go. This is their Shitogami or white number 2 Nashiji Gyuto, the 240 millimeter version. And so the core steel in this knife line is Shitogami, also known as white paper number 2. Reactive high carbon steel from Hitachi. Heat treat is done pretty much by feel and by eye, so they shoot for around 61 to 62 Rockwell. Not necessarily a scientific, evaluation of that, but that's about what you're looking at. The construction is 3 layers, so there is soft stainless cladding on either side of that Shitogami number 2, and you can see the core steel at the edge very easily there in a really neat looking, aesthetically looking grind line, or I should say cladding line there where the core steel meets the cladding. On some knives, I think the cladding does come over the top of the spine, but it's pretty thin. Like on the 210, I saw a little staining on the spine where the core steel was just peeking through. So check your knife carefully, but it'd be a good idea to keep the spine dry. Just make sure you dry that part because it may just barely cover that cladding, or the cladding may be peeking through just here and there. So that's a place to pay attention to. We know the core steel is reactive and the cladding is stainless. It's not 100% stainless, but it might show a little bit of staining. Mine, on this demo one I've been using, it's got a little bit of staining, light staining on it. So these aren't full-on, Mondo saltwater stainless, the cladding on these, but so they might show a little bit of staining. But anyway, keep an eye on the spine just in case. The weights and dimensions on these will vary a little bit from knife to knife because they are hand-hammered, handmade. And so this particular one is 175 grams or 6.2 ounces. Edge length, these are generally oversized 240, so within a couple of samples, they're both around 245, 246. So this one's about 245 on the edge from the chin, the back of the heel, all the way to the tip. So generous size. They're about a little over 9.6 inches. The overall length is about 390 millimeters or 15.3-ish inches. And these are pretty thick coming out of the handle, but then they thin down pretty aggressively towards the front half of the blade. And then they don't have a ton of distal taper towards the tip, but the tip is very thin because of the generous grind, and the tip works really well through soft products. So they're also ground quite thin at the edge, so these are very, very good performing knives. So some people balk at, a thick spine coming out of the handle. That does not tell the whole story. It really depends on the individual knife. So this particular one's about 4.1. They'll be 4-ish millimeters. And then about halfway down the blade, it's about 2.1. So it changes quite a bit. We'll get a close-up of it here. So pretty thick coming out of the handle, then about half of that. And then not a ton of taper, but a little bit. And then where the taper really comes in is where the grind kicks in. So again, the tip on these is simply outstanding. The handle is nothing fancy, but it's well executed. It's a octagonal ambidextrous hoe wood with the buffalo horn ferrule, and the fit and finish is pretty nice. I've got like 6 samples of this handle, and they're all, with a couple exceptions, they're all pretty smooth where the ferrule meets the wood. Yours could vary just a little bit, but they're really, I've not seen a need to touch any of them if I had that knife. The install is really tight at the tang, which is pretty nice, although you might want to still seal that front-facing wood up with something. I usually like to, epoxy or beeswax or something. You can treat the handle if you want. Handles are quite light. They're about 76 millimeters or 3 inches in circumference where the ferrule meets the wood. Pretty standard size for this type of handle. And the handles are light, so that brings the balance point a little bit forward, which gives you a lot of chopping power. So there's the balance point on the 240, and that is definitely in front of my pinch grip. If you've got bigger hands, it might be a little closer to it. But this knife has some authoritative chopping power, definitely. And it's really quite similar to the 210. They behave very similarly, except the 240 just gives you more mass and more chopping power. You can really feel the difference going through product with the 240. It's just, again, they behave really similarly. The profiles are similar, but the 240 definitely has more authority for sure. So if you're doing prep and you want a knife that's, I hate to use the word workhorse, but you want something that's got some authority to it, this would be a really cool choice. Let's take a close-up look. These are well-executed, well-done blades. The craftsmanship is high quality. They've got hand-chiseled kanji. They've got a cool Nashiji or pear skin finish on them that has some definite texture to it. Every knife has been different. And so they've got a bit more texture than some knife lines. Let's say the Masakage Yuki is a good example. I really think the aesthetic effect is pretty awesome. You can see the core steel peeking through, and the way they ground these, they've got almost looks like an extra layer there, but it's really a neat effect coming off the grind into the core steel at the edge. And then they've got a frosted blade road on these, so it's a really cool aesthetic. Fit and finish, as I said, is high. You've got a polished spine, rounded spine, polished and rounded choil, really well ground blade, very straight. Profiles are smooth, so these are high level of craftsmanship. Let's take a look at the profile, and these are all pretty consistent, so yours should be pretty similar to these based on 4 samples I've seen. Really 6 if you count the Nakiris. So they've got a nice flat spot in the back half of the blade, so great for chopping. And then they've got not super aggressive, but a nice curve to the belly, and you can get fairly high with these as well. So every knife will be slightly different. This one I'm getting about right there, so plenty of height for rocking, and it transitions smoothly into a stop. It's not a huge like clunky stop, but it does smooth out into a flat heel. But the grind is really nicely done on these, and they're all the same way. 4 samples I've seen between this and the KU line, the Kurouchi line. So just a really good overall profile that should work well for a lot of techniques, unless you just want something with a lot of belly to it at the heel as well for major rocking. This has just a really good overall round profile. Really smooth. So again, performance on this is really, really good. This thing just annihilated onions. The tip worked great through it. The middle section, the back section for chopping. So like in a 3-way dice when you're finishing it up, this is boom, boom, boom. I mean, every part of the knife was just great. Low wedging. It's not a laser, but it's got pretty low wedging through. At least I did some big carrots, and then halving and quartering cabbage was just easy. Just a little bit of authority and right through. Didn't get stuck. Just went right through the cabbage really well. Wasn't a massive head of cabbage, but I did a couple different ones. So just, I can't say enough about the performance of the knife. It's thin at the edge. It's a little bit along the lines of the Gihei Blue No. 2 Nashiji, but they're not as heavy, not quite as thick, and the profile's a little bit more gentle. It doesn't quite slam into a bigger heel like the Gihei does, so just a little different style. So they might appeal to a little more. The Gihei style is pretty, you got to have a pretty good affinity for that style. So this one backs off of that just a little bit in terms of handling. So anyway, so you have a great knife. This is the Yahiko Shidogami No. 2 Nashiji Gyuto 240mm knife.